I was just thinking about recently how at various points in people's lives, people will go to philosophy in search for answers. Not everyone, but a lot of people will at some point in their life reach a point where they're looking for answers for something, and one of the sources they look to is philosophy, which raises the great question, what are you trying to get out of philosophy? And I think that question, more than anything else, really determines who you read, basically. Because there's a lot in philosophy, and yes, if you go the traditional academic route, then basically you're going to start with the Greeks and move up in sequential order until you get to the postmodern philosophers. But outside of that setting, and I think a lot of people do read philosophy more, or at least at some point try to dabble in it more casually, they will go to specific thinkers. They're oriented towards specific thinkers because they are addressing certain questions that they have. And that's the core motivation of why you're searching there in the first place, because you have some kind of question that you want answers to. And so I guess I just listed the question, like, what is the prime question that you were searching answers for?
I was trying to figure out what is wrong with modernity. Mm-hmm. That was the main issue I undertook like almost 10 years ago now, and it goes back to like 2015, 2016, 2017 when I was in university, and I could see like this, I really hesitate to use the word like political correctness, or like this need to police language that I knew was intellectually dishonest. And it was less about the actual ideas, it was just the tone policing that felt like this is not allowing me to express myself freely in dialogue without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells and am at risk of being, lambasted for having the wrong opinion. And I thought, like, intuitively, shouldn't anybody be able to express their opinion openly? And I was thinking about free speech, right? But I was 18, I wasn't reading too much at the time, and thanks to YouTube, going through my newsfeed, certain Jordan Peterson appeared in my feed, and all of a sudden this guy starts...
Like 2016, right?
Yeah, this is a long time ago, and I remember listening to his lectures and his podcasts, and he like even specifically talked about how like YouTube is a miracle and that it's like akin to a Gutenberg revolution, where we have so much information accessible to even more people now, because only a certain select amount of people can read, but many people can certainly listen. And I remember that was sort of like the starting point for me, because I'm like, well, I'm listening right now, but he's definitely right. I should be reading a bit more. And I think I made the mistake when I was 18, just like, I'll just read some Nietzsche. Just read Nietzsche. But I'm like, get like 3 pages, and I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
But gently put the book back in the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not ready for that. And so I was just interested in ideas, and Jordan Peterson spoke about free speech, of course, and about how it's not necessarily that you are speaking; it's that it's your right to think openly. And if you can't think, then you can't act, and you can't participate in like the public discussion. So for me, it was like putting a language to whatever the hell was going on in a way that I could like internalize it and also defend my own ideas against people speaking in bad faith. I think that's how it started. And then ever since then, I've always found like this strange, like sort of not dissonance, but when I have a discussion with people who really have strong confirmation bias about like their belief system, be it like a right or left, I'm like, I want to pick their brain and figure out how they got there. And right now, I'm kind of reading Foucault. I haven't been reading Foucault too much in the last couple of weeks, but like I started reading Foucault because he's like a lot of people liken Nietzsche to a hammer and Foucault to the scalpel. So Nietzsche took the hammer and he smashed the rock, and then Foucault kind of like chiseled it and created like the image of postmodernity. And I think that it's relevant to understand just what's going on right these days, because you always hear like everyone's gone crazy, we're living in clown world. It's like, okay, well, why are we living in clown world? Can we describe that? And that sort of summarizes my particular motivations, but I think you're different.
I think but I think to touch on what you're talking about first, I think Foucault is one of the most cited academics ever, which just shows how influential he is. So if you're interested to see, like, your primary question that you're searching answers for is, how did modernity get here? Foucault does seem to be kind of at the root, and then, like, even deeper would be Nietzsche, right? Foucault is so influenced by Nietzsche, but like in some sense, it might not be it might be pretty accurate to say that you could blame Foucault in some sense for modern clown world, at least what you see in academia. And unfortunately, what happens in academia has weird, like, effects on what you see in the media, and then the media influences perceptions of reality and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think there is a real influence there.
Yes. There's certainly an influence. Like, from what little I know, and for anybody who actually read Foucault, like, much more thoroughly than I did, go ahead and write a comment. But I know Foucault was all about breaking through the social constructs, so to speak. Like, he made the I think it's called the panopticon. Everyone's watching you, and your behavior is like, society creates you.
Yeah.
And because society creates you, you are sleeping. And the way to wake up from that sleep is to take that power into your own hands and maybe manipulate it yourself. I know Nietzsche was definitely speaking about the will to power, and that's like the primary motivation behind, like, any human action is just, we're power hungry beings.
Yep.
And eventually people who reach the top, they have master morality, and then the people at the bottom who are less fortunate have slave morality. And it's cool, it's fun to engage with. Am I 100% convinced of it? No, but it certainly makes sense as to how everything is justified now.
But I think also part of the problem is, like, a flip side of the coin, that it's kind of like that saying that goes something like, half-truths are more damaging than complete falsehoods.
Oh.
Because you know a falsehood is a falsehood. And I think kind of the dangerous effects of, let's just lump them together for now, Nietzsche and then Foucault especially, is there's some really good points they make,
yes,
but I think they're like half or like 75% truths. And the problem is that 25%, that just something a little bit off, has really bad effects. And so, again, a lot of us will agree that modernity is kind of like, dude, like, this, something ain't right. And like we were just saying, that you could get at the core of that, a lot of the core of the justifications that, again, like, leftists will use, the kind of framing of everything of their discussion has its roots in stuff Foucault talks about. So you can directly blame Foucault for why things suck now in a certain aspect.
Yeah, definitely. It's well, I was just about to make the point, and that this is like the main problem I have with Foucault, and I was thinking about this recently, is with a philosophy like that, essentially you can justify absolutely anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know what to do with that, because if that is true, if you can justify absolutely anything, then basically it's what is it, like a Hobbesian nightmare of power structures, or like, power hungry agents attempting to get to the top and rise to the top of the heap. Like, I don't see that as a very positive worldview. And when Sam was here, he discussed, like, the idea of common sense, and like, I see his point, and I think he is onto something, in that there are just some things that collectively, there's like a collective unconscious around, like, ideas that 90 to 95% of humanity is disgusted by, but because it's the internet, you can always find somebody who disagrees with you on basically anything. That small minority of people will find a way to justify it, creating the illusion that these are like 50-50 spectrums, and like, one side, there's this side and there's that side, when in reality, if you look at the numbers, clearly that's not the case. And I see his point, and I think that the idea of everything being power structures is incredibly damaging, because then how do you create value?
Yeah. No, and that's exactly, for me, that's the launching off point for kind of where my interest began. Because around, like, 2017, I just found myself like just through cultural osmosis, and if you grow up in a place, if you grow up, in an academic background in a place like New York City, you just kind of absorb a lot of these ideas by they're in the osmosis. They're just like that's the cultural atmosphere, right? A lot of these attitudes, and the problem with it is, yeah, how do you find true values? Because basically you can justify anything with this ideology. So does that then mean that nothing really matters? And in that case, I just found myself in a little bit of a dilemma where I was trying to, because at that point in my life I was still an atheist. Mm-hmm. So I was like, why do ethics matter at all? Mm-hmm. And I there was just a personal question, or rather, in my personal life, there was a situation that came up where I was like, I could do the unethical thing, and there would be no consequences for it, like materially. Like if I didn't even have to be that smart about it. I could easily cover up whatever, and I would be fine. But I was so disgusted at that idea that I didn't want to do it. So then I was trying to get it to root. Well, but then at the same time, I have a culture that's basically telling me nothing matters. Mm-hmm. That's a philosophy of the culture. What's funny is I think people innately don't believe this. Even the people who say this stuff don't really believe it because they don't really live that way. But I was trying to live, quote unquote, logically, and I was like, well, if logically I don't believe in God and I don't believe in any kind of basis for morality, why am I essentially cucking myself by denying myself a way I could benefit materially a little bit more, but that like ethically, like I shouldn't? So then I got really interested in the question of ethics. That I was like, well, like, am I wrong to feel this way? Like, am I wrong to feel that I shouldn't do this, or not? And that kind of started my own investigation, and the long-term result of that is I'm no longer an atheist. And the long-term result is like there is an absolute morality, there is right and wrong, and the nihilism that is in vogue right now, basically, it is completely mistaken. Is basically where my investigations finally took me, but there are like many different sub-steps. Like at a certain point, my interests kind of went in different directions, but it ultimately went there.
A lot of people never truly graduate from nihilism. I remember meeting people. This happened to me maybe about a year ago, when I used to go to Golden Guy a lot because I just wanted to talk to the tourists. Yeah. I wouldn't mind just having like just one beer. Yeah. And it's like my version of going to like a casino. It's like, am I gonna get a good conversation tonight?
Yeah, so it's like a gotcha, like those gotcha machines where you put in the money and you don't know what you're gonna get. Right. You know, it's like you have no idea. Yeah, you have no idea what you're going to get, what conversation you're going to get, right?
Right, and sometimes I got really, really good conversations, others horrible, and most of them very mediocre and hard, barely memorable at all. And I just remember this guy brought up the YouTuber Wisecrack.
Familiar name. I
don't really know too much. All I know is like he's I guess I'm not gonna say anything negative about Wisecrack other than like I looked at his channel. I'm like, okay, definitely like more of a left-leaning dude. Probably more in that nihilistic headspace. And then he says the words like, yeah, I studied philosophy and I did what I wasn't supposed to, and that was never graduate from nihilism. So his worldview is just, I guess anything is justified, and I guess you don't really care. And he's like working at some like some firm. I don't know if it was a graphic design firm or an accountant, and he's just living that normie lifestyle of, get married, I guess, not sure if you're going to have kids, make a lot of money, and then travel and do your thing. And, I mean, fine. That's, for some people, as you say, maybe he's spiritually dead. That's the kind of lifestyle he wants to live. But I never really find that satisfying because nihilism, accepting nihilism is like a philosophical dead end.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but, like, in that own situation, right? Like, morally, there's nothing exactly wrong. I mean, like what you just described is the norm, like a normal life path, right? Right. Get married, get a job, get married, travel, do whatever you need to do. That's normal. There's nothing wrong there. My question, basically, and this would kind of inform my initial questioning, is okay, if you don't believe in God, and if you are an explicit, like in this case, an overt nihilist, why get married? Or if you're gonna get married, why not have a bunch of whores on the side, or like do all this stuff? Because that's actually behaving like a nihilist. But if you claim to be a nihilist, and then you basically just unconsciously follow conventional morality, like you get married, you don't cheat on your wife, you basically live the normal life path, then you're not really a nihilist by your actions. Like there is something your subconscious does not subscribe to it. And that was the core question I was trying to get to, because like I kind of realized myself, like I logically at the time was like I like there's no objective value. So, and then I was like, well, why do I feel why I have this subconscious pressure to behave in accordance to this morality? Like I don't want to cuck myself, essentially. And I don't think you're a true nihilist if you're basically living the conventional moral path. If you're not living it. And that was what I was trying to challenge. I'm like, I wanted to be consistent with how I live, which is why I ultimately turned away from that, because I'm like, well, the way I want to live is in accordance with conventional morality, and therefore that I kind of like found a path that intellectually that I like that makes sense, right? Essentially.
I mean, again, it's strange that you brought this up in a previous podcast. I was playing devil's advocate with you and Sam because I just wanted to see what your answers would be. You make a good point in that a lot of people who bring up the idea of social constructivism don't actually believe it themselves because it's so manifest in their actions. But the sort of bell curve of like, you got the 85 IQ normal dude who's just like, it is what it is, like that. This is just obvious to me. And then obviously the 130 IQ, 145 IQ agreeing with the 185 dude. But then you have everybody who's like sort of in the middle, maybe like actually right, midwittery. I found that pretty interesting, especially because I think Schopenhauer is actually used a lot in those memes, where he looks something like a Schopenhauer kind of figure.
I've seen him often. Yeah, the Schopenhauer Wojak is often in that. Yeah.
Yes, and that was a philosopher who had a profound impact on me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a fan of Shopee myself. Actually, I quite like Shopee boy.
I remember reading Shopee in my room during the scary virus. Can we say
the bullshit virus?
The bullshit virus. The psyop virus.
Yeah, the psyop virus. Yeah, that's what we're calling it. The psyop virus. Yeah.
And because like I spent I always bring up the story. I hope it doesn't get boring. It's just like it was so traumatizing to spend 2 years in my room.
Yeah.
Alone. No job. And I just had books and music. And that was one of the books that I picked up in that time that I found on Amazon. I think it was like a used book I got for like not even $1.79.
Wow.
And just like sitting in my room and hearing Schopenhauer talk about like how it's great to be a child because you're still sitting in front of the curtains unaware of not your sentence to death but to life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit, man, this guy is... This guy's a doomer in like 1858.
Yeah.
Whoa. And that resonated with me because, again, putting a language to something that obviously I already felt, but it's said in a way that, like, I don't know, you can internalize it. I think when you put something in language, it's it allows it to be consumed. I don't know exactly how to put this. Think of it like cooking, you know? It's like your thoughts, your unfiltered... said thoughts are like ingredients, and then philosophy is cooking them, and then thinking about that philosophy is like consumption. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It's like a big pie you make. I kind of get the analogy that I guess you could say like your own thoughts. Again, basically the questions that lead you to philosophy are the raw ingredients, and philosophy is a recipe. Right. Whichever philosopher you're reading, he's kind of like, that's the recipe you're following, at least, while you're engaging with them, essentially.
Right. Exactly.
And then I guess your own conclusion, your take on that philosopher when you're done, when you really kind of digest their material, or when you actually fully cook your raw ingredients with their recipe, your final take on the philosopher, that's the cake. You know, that's the product you have there. So
yeah, your ingredients with their philosophy. So if you're working with like, you know, cage-free eggs and you make an omelet, man, that's gonna be a lot different from somebody with organic eggs. I don't know where I'm going with this. But that would totally make sense. But seriously, and I haven't read as much philosophy as I'd have liked in my life. But if I were to name the ones that were most influential, I really liked Schopenhauer. Nietzsche was pretty good. Foucault definitely left a little bit of a lasting impression on me. I tried getting into Camus. Didn't really like Camus as much as I thought I would. I thought that he was a little too nihilistic, absurdist, maybe and then I've heard great things about Kierkegaard.
Actually, I mean, he was the one who I started with when I was talking about the journey of ethics. Kierkegaard was the one I started with. But the problem with Kierkegaard is the guy writes and he writes and he writes. So like I like Fear and Trembling. That's one of his famous works. It's like pretty alright. It's like this thick. It's like it's not so bad. But then I went to Either or, and this is like one of the most famous books. Either and or. It's split in two parts. Either and
best
or.
Album.
Interesting.
Sorry.
This is the size of Either, and this is the size of or. And I basically got like, not even a quarter. I got like an eighth into Either, and I was like, "There's some interesting points here," but I'm done. And we're talking about two door stoppers, you know.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, interesting thinker. But like, I'll just be honest with you, I couldn't get through him. He's just too much there.
Yeah, Well, that's another thing about philosophers too. I really think about. So you can go on Nietze, or you can go on the internet.
That's actually the good point about Nietzsche. I think there's a quote from Nietzsche that he says like, what some philosophers say in whole books, I say in a sentence. But like, he's a very efficient writer. He's a very good writer. I think like that is actually one of his best qualities. Like I think his philosophy, like he's good at talking about ideas, but like his writing is like S tier.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of philosophers are not S tier writers, you know.
I mean, I tried reading Kant.
yeah, and he's like D minus for writing.
I remember the only Kant book that I think it wasn't even the Critique of Pure Reason. It was like the I forget the word. I'm not academic enough to remember, but you have to read a book to read a fucking book. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, why though?
Why can't you just tell me in one book, man? I don't. Ain't nobody got time for that. Which maybe there is something of substance in there, and I'm not getting it. But the way Kant wrote, it's like he was doing math with philosophy.
Yeah.
The categorical imperative and how everything is a universal action. Like, yeah, I get it. You know?
There's a funny meme. I remember this being posted on Lit, and I don't know if this was just a troll post or if this is true, but somebody was claiming this excerpt was from a real interaction that, like a real correspondence that Kant had with with somebody who read his works. And again, this is 4chan's literature board. I don't know if this is bullshit or if this is or actually somebody just posting something that's true. But supposedly the correspondence went with like some woman, like she wrote a letter to Kant asking what she should do, because she was in a bit of a quandary about like how she was going to get married to a guy under the pretext that she's a virgin or something, but she's not a virgin or something like this. It was something along those lines.
Yes.
And Kant, but it was a bit more convoluted than that too, because that sounds overly simplistic. But it was something convoluted like that, and she was like, "Should I inform my husband or my to-be husband about this?" And Kant is like, you absolutely have to. It's your ethical obligation. And then apparently and again, I don't know if this story is real or not, but apparently she did, and this led to a lot of problems, and then she ultimately killed herself. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably the logical conclusion Kant will get you, necking yourself.
Yeah. I mean, just but again, it's like a lot of this is
Self-terminated.
Self-terminated,
Yeah.
Unalived.
Yeah, unalived. Yeah.
Yes, we're destroying the English language, one depraved internet word at a time. But yeah, the thing is too with Kant is, everything should be like a universal action. You should be able to do it in every context, and I think that's like noble to try at least to objectify it. But I don't know. I think a lot of people go into philosophy or like they ask the question, "What is true?" As though you're gonna get one solid answer, and I don't think anybody ever has actually arrived at an answer. It's like almost a constant dialogue through life that some people ascertain and other people don't, and start justifying their half truths or their falsehoods as they as you said. And I
This is where I almost feel like in some area, like Buddhism makes a good point, because in Buddhism, you have these koans. I think this comes from Zen Buddhism, but basically koans are basically this anecdote of how somebody reached enlightenment. And usually it involves a student of Buddhism, like a monk, talking to his mentor, essentially his teacher. And it's some question, but then the teacher will give some nonsensical answer that doesn't make sense to anyone, but it makes perfect. But at that moment, the student reaches enlightenment, and it's it doesn't make sense to anyone else but them specifically. And it kind of gets to the point of it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's kind of true. Of it's hard to find a universal truth, but I think it's accurate that everyone has their own truth. But in a sense, that's an unsatisfying answer, because people obviously looking for the quote-unquote truth are not going to be satisfied when somebody says, well, you have to find your truth. Because what does that require? I mean, that basically requires doing deep inward work, and I think a lot of people are trying to look for the answer outward, whereas that answer, you have to find your truth, is saying you have to look inward. And in this case, it's kind of each, in the Buddhist context, each path to enlightenment is so individualistic, that's the core of that one person, that it takes a nonsensical answer that doesn't make sense to anyone else but that one person for them to supposedly reach enlightenment.
I guess the way that I'm picturing what you're saying is, you take a logo, take any shape. Let's say the underlying shape is the truth that we all sort of feel, but then the personality, I don't want to say personification, but when you arrive at your own truth, as you're saying, it's maybe your life is just conforming to that shape in its own way.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect analogy. It's kind of let's just say there is an objective, one truth, but everyone's perspective is so muddled, they can only perceive it in different ways.
Yes.
Let's say different shades, and so the exact shade one person sees it is going to be different from another shade, but that core underlying shape is objectively true, but it's just given human limitations, intellectually and otherwise, we can't perceive it properly.
Right, and I think that's actually a fairly good point, is to to reach for it, and maybe you have, or maybe you're in the realm of truth. I do really appreciate the language that JBP uses. It's how maybe you're not speaking the truth, but you're speaking in the roughly in the realm of it. You're getting closer. You're making an attempt, and everybody with human authenticity and the variations in personality, it's absolutely impossible for everybody to be exactly the same behaviorally. But if they find that shape and then they conform somewhat to it, there obviously will be, I guess, their own personality that shines through in unique ways while still conforming, adhering to the undergirding that truth really is. And the people who don't believe in that, the postmodernists, I guess, are just justify anything, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that would sort of make sense. And when you ask, well, what is that underlying shape? I feel like Sam said it best. You just know.
You
You just know. I don't know, man. But I don't really have too much else to say. What about you?
No, that was a good one.
All right.
See you guys.